as you'll find out today, we have a diverse group of speakers that have contributed to this year's edition. And I want to say again, this is our 23rd edition. I've been reading Early Childhood Matters, I myself, for over 15 years. I've been working for the Foundation for 6 years. And this has been a standing reading for me to learn more about what is the innovative things happening in the field of early childhood development. And today I want to present Pamela Druckerman, who is our editor who was invited to help us do this, this great edition on Early Childhood Matters. Pamela is a great journalist and an amazing writer. So for those of you who haven't heard about Pamela, I do highly recommend that you also read Bringing Up Bebé, which is one of her greatest books. And it's also a really fun book to read and learn about early childhood matters and also how to raise a baby in different contexts. So Pamela, we're thrilled to have you join us today, and thank you so much for your contribution to this year's edition. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, so I'll just pass it to you so we can start right away.
Thank you so much, Ceci. It was really a pleasure and an honor to work on this year's ECM with you. I also just want to briefly acknowledge Hannah Rothschild, the managing editor, who has been the brains and the organizational powerhouse behind this year's issue. So thank you, Hannah. I should say that when I started working on this year's edition of ECM, it really wasn't obvious to me that young children would be more affected by climate change than anyone else. But 6 months, 7 months into working on the project, I completely get it. This year's issue has 34 articles. They range from tips about how to speak to your child about climate change. That one is called Don't Say It Will Just All Be All Right. To an interview with an Indian mother who's been waging a sometimes one-woman battle against air pollution in New Delhi. Some of the articles, I have to admit, are alarming. The one that really got to me was about how rising heat levels, which we are already seeing, of course, are particularly dangerous for small children. But I'm happy to say that there are also a number of uplifting articles, encouraging at least, about what cities around the world are doing and what individuals around the world are doing to combat climate change in effective ways. So now I will bring us to our opening speaker. She is the environmental activist, Wanjira Mathai. She's coming to us live from Nairobi, Kenya. Wanjira is Vice President and Regional Director for Africa at the World Resources Institute. She is also chair of the Wanjira Mathai Foundation, which continues the work of her mother, who is Wangari Maathai, the first African woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize and founder of the Green Belt movement, which planted millions of trees in Kenya, among other things. Wanjira, welcome. Thank you for coming today. You've made the very critical point that to solve the climate problem, we must engage women. Why women? Why are women so critical? And how specifically does women's involvement affect young children?
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you so much for everybody. It's a privilege to be in this company and look forward to reading all the wonderful entries in this issue. The thoughts around why talking about early childhood, women and climate actually matters. If you think about this decade we're in, it demands so much of all of us. We're living in truly interesting times. I've actually been struck by the fact that in just over 2 years, the context of the work that we do and the task ahead has become more urgent, and it has actually become clearer. But it hasn't become any easier. And there are 3 words that I feel continue to frame everything that we do these days: uncertainty, inequity, and urgency. And then so all the work that we do and however we choose to shape this work, my work here in particular in Africa has got to include women and children. Resilience and rural prosperity have to be at the heart of how we build forward. And at the core of both of those are women. And so we look at what this means for an entire generation. We are all going to be important players of this. The truth is that the reason why childhood matters is that it's such a foundational issue. It's in more ways than one. The education children have access to determines so much about their future. The nutrition they access early on, we know that what the nutrition that children have before they're 5-year-old will determine, already locks in a lot of their mental and other future health status. And the healthcare, of course, that they access determines their life expectancy, not to mention the experiences that they have in nature and around them. So all of these, I'm sure, and many more, shape who they become and their role in society. You mentioned my mother. I've always been inspired by her story. She was the first African woman, yes, to win the Nobel Peace Prize. But her childhood, every time she talks about it, was colored by an extremely vibrant childhood, growing up in the rural highlands of Kenya, in the village of Ihide, playing with tadpoles, walking in the forest, observing fast-flowing rivers, black rocks at the very bottom, which means these were extremely crystal clear waters. The forests were intact, and so these rivers were not silted. She became accustomed to this beauty and wonder, and it was the absence of this that actually triggered a deep sense of discomfort when she was much older to drive something and do something about it. And that's when the Greenbelt movement was born. So it does matter how children start off. It really, really does. And the reason I think the link is so important to climate is that the seeds and the drivers of poverty, especially in climate vulnerable countries, which render families and children vulnerable to climate change, are often always sown early in their lives. The climate adaptation agenda, and also now, as everybody in the world knows, the loss and damage agenda, are exacerbated by poverty. And so addressing poverty is at the heart of climate action, and that is where women come in. In the work that I do at the World Resources Institute in Africa, agriculture is one of the most important pillars that we believe we have to crack open for real opportunities for prosperity, particularly for women. And here's why. Across sub-Saharan Africa, agriculture is the predominant sector in economies and countries. Between 30 to 40% of GDP is in this sector alone. 2/3 of jobs in this continent are in the agricultural sector. And that's extremely special for Africa. And a majority of the food that we consume today, close to 80% in non-industrialized countries, that means this agriculture is rain-fed, it's not driven by industry, is actually produced by small-scale farmers. And a majority of these small-scale farmers are women. That's why women are so important. And the fact that women are overrepresented in unpaid, seasonal, and part-time work renders them the poorest. And so imagine a situation where you have women largely producing food for a growing population, and they are the poorest in the world. That spells disaster. And as I said, the underlying driver of vulnerability to climate is poverty. And so you can see how that is directly linked. According to the Climate Change IPCC, Africa remains one of the most vulnerable continents to climate change. And the reason that is because we have a very strong economic reliance to agriculture. And therefore we are a very climate dependent, it's a very highly climate dependent economy. And so that vulnerability is crucial for how we move forward and how, survival as we know it for most in this continent works. So there's a very powerful emerging paradigm that I think provides a crucial paradigm. We use it at WRI, and we believe that this is how we must innovate around climate and gender. It's one that is evolving, and I hope that investors and governments and practitioners everywhere take it to heart. And I often say, if you hear nothing else about what I say today, I hope you will hear that we have to put nature at the heart of our investments to build resilience for communities. And this paradigm has 4 words. It's produce, protect, reduce, and restore. First, we have to produce food more efficiently and sustainably. We have heard that food waste is one of the biggest opportunities to address hunger in the world. 30% of food goes to waste. We've got to produce food more efficiently and sustainably. Protect. We have to protect the remaining forests in our cities, but also in our countries. Forests in the world, in particular the Congo forest. I don't know how many people here know that the Congo is the healthiest tropical forests remaining of the Amazon, the Congo, and the Southeast Asian forest. These three are the lungs of the globe, and yet the Congo forest remains the most healthy. We have to protect it because our lives depend on it, not even as if. We also have to protect trees in cities, and that is one of the most important climate adaptation agendas. We have to reduce food waste. I mentioned that. And finally, Pamela, we have to restore forests and degraded areas. So, ladies and gentlemen, we must deliver hope, and that's how we do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wanjira. That was an inspiring overview of what we must do going forward. I'm going to move us on now to our author roundtable. It's a sampling of some of the wonderful contributors in this year's ECM. I'll introduce first the 5 panelists of our roundtable. Bruce Bekkar, who's coming to us from San Diego, California, where it is about 6 a.m. Thank you, Bruce, for waking up for us, is an OBGYN who has researched how climate change affects pregnant women. Loreto Stambuk is coming to us from Santiago, Chile. She is director of the Aires Nuevos project, which she will tell us about. Maya Mailer is here. She is in London. She is a parent climate activist based in the UK. She'll tell us what that is exactly. Sana Suhal is coming to us from the United Arab Emirates. She is Director General of Abu Dhabi's Early Childhood Authority. Welcome, Sana. And FRANCINE is our 5th panelist. She's in the Netherlands. She's the founder of Meccano Architects, which she will also tell us about. So welcome to all our panelists. Bruce Bekkar, I'll start with you. You looked around for data on how climate change affects newborns in the US, and you found quite a few individual studies, but no sort of study of studies synthesizing all of this data. So you and a colleague did exactly this. You synthesized it. What did you find? What do we know about how climate change and specifically heat and air pollution affects pregnant women and babies?
First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to join this panel and to address this audience. I might have just woken up not too long ago, but I'm incredibly inspired already by the quality and the diversity. And it reminds me that maybe one of the major positive messages we've been missing in this whole effort to talk, to address climate's threats to health is how much it's bringing us together, not only just in the medical community, but also across the world. And there are so many opportunities, I think, that we have to multi-solve as a result of this crisis that it fills me with inspiration and hope. So first of all, again, greetings from California. It's really an honor to join this panel and contribute to this article in ECM. We began our research into climate's impacts on birth outcomes after the American Academy of Pediatrics published a report in late 2015 that looked at the range of climate threats to the world's children. And it included a quote from the World Health Organization at the time that actually said over 85% of the disease burden of climate would fall on children under the age of 5. That was a really shocking thing to read from the WHO. And it inspired us to put a small group of researchers together to actually look at when the impacts of climate change actually began to affect children and to figure out whether or not it was having an impact on births. And we're joined in the audience today with my senior author, Dr. Nate DiNicola, who has an extensive background in academics. And primarily he and I did an in-depth systematic review of the studies in the domestic US, looking at very common exposures, heat and air pollutants on birth outcomes. And the reason that we chose those exposures was not only because they're so common, but also because they are the types of exposures that were showing up in the literature. So these were being connected in multiple studies with premature birth, low birth weight, and stillbirth. Anyway, we took a look at these 68 studies and stayed with the domestic US primarily because we didn't want people to be able to make the excuse that this was happening somewhere else and we didn't need to worry about it in the US. Anyway, looking over those studies, these were really big studies. The mean number of births per study was over 500,000, and 57 out of 68 of the studies found a very strong association between these extremely common exposures of elevated temperatures in two types of air pollutants, PM 2.5 and ozone, and these bad birth outcomes. And I'm sure the majority of this audience understands that although preemies and low birth weight babies generally survive these days, they face a number of challenges in childhood and in adulthood, and essentially they're weakened from birth. So it's a really concerning thing that we found this strong of an association. In addition, we found that over half of the air pollution studies, which was the largest category in our research, noted worse outcomes for minority moms, with Black moms being called out more than twice as often as Latinas, which was the next highest risk group. So we weren't looking necessarily for this data, but it jumped out from our research, and we felt it was a really important thing to speak about. Anyway, a little bit more particularly, the air pollution studies were very strongly associated, as were the heat studies, with these bad birth outcomes. And there were over 32 million births in total all over the US. And so it would appear from our data, in addition to the studies that suggest that these effects are understandable biologically, that they are a cause and effect kind of a relationship, that we have an emerging problem, I'm sure, well beyond the US borders, between common exposures linked to climate change and dangerous birth outcomes. So
thank you so much,
sure.
Bruce, for that overview. There's a lot more detail in your article, which I hope everyone here will read. Our next speaker is Loreto Stambuk. As I said, she's coming to us from Santiago, Chile. Loreto, your project, Aires Nuevos, started out with two pieces of data. One piece is that hundreds of children aged 4 and under die annually in South America because of air pollution, and many more become ill as a result of that. And yet many Latin American countries don't have a single air monitoring station, or they have very few. So you and your colleagues started Aires Nuevos to monitor the air quality specifically that small children breathe, and specifically when they're going to and from school and in playgrounds and areas like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the birth of the project and why you decided to focus on young children in particular?
Thank you so much, Pamela, and everybody. This is amazing. I feel so thrilled to be part of this panel. And as you were saying exactly, of the 33 countries that are part of Latin America, only 9 of them have report continuous national ambient air quality monitoring data. So, and it's estimated that 93% of children breathe toxic air. However, we know that this burden is unevenly distributed if it's in a developing country or a developed country, right? And also we know that 750 children aged 4 and under and younger die annually in South America because of lower respiratory tract infections caused by outdoor fine particle pollution, mostly from burning of fossil fuels. So all this situation made us move forward, and we decided to start measuring where children spend most of their time learning and playing, and that is preschool or schools. And so when you get into schools, you get into contact with the community, and so you get closer also to a local government that is supporting the schools or these preschools, and you can start interacting directly with local decision makers to make possible many transformations easier to attain and to adapt in your territory. So by placing these low-cost monitors in 8 countries in Latin America, in more than 40 cities, we are deploying more than 100 monitors. You can give educators, you can give caregivers, parents from the community a tool that if you complement with trainings and make them understand what the monitors are measuring, are saying, you can provide citizens with an access to air quality data, and people start making visible what was invisible for their eyes before. So that comes also in the hand with an application, an app that is called Air Visual. So there's a big case for democratizing air quality information. So also
the app, just to clarify, Loreto, the app is what people use to see what the current air quality is in their town or their city.
Right. It comes with the monitor, and it comes with you can look at the data in the web page, but also you can download an application. So you can take what the quality of the air is outside. And this has been a tool, an amazing tool, for example, for preschools that there are cities that have very poor air quality. 1 or 2 days they have like the worst quality of air, and they can plan at what time the children can go outside and play. So we have another problem, which is obesity in children in these cities, that they cannot play outside. So this is a tool that educators have been using to change this activity, the time where the children can play. So this is so not only it's an access for everybody, but also it's an education tool for caregivers. So also our bottom-up approach includes that local governments and universities start working together in a collaborative way. So what universities do with the data, they can transmit the knowledge, the research to the local government, and so they can have more knowledge what's going on in their cities, something that they weren't unable to process because due to the charge of tasks that they usually have. So this action might include, for example, diverting heavy diesel traffic away from the vicinity of schools, or prohibiting vehicles from idling, and or using, for example, nuisance regulations to curtail emissions from local industry. So
one thing, sorry, Loreto, I'm going to have to cut you off, but one thing you also mentioned, which I thought was very interesting, is getting school buses to stop idling in front of schools, that you found that this was a big cause of pollution. It's
exactly. It could be like three more times higher the concentration of pollution when you wait for your children outside your school.
Okay, thank you very much. And I see we put in chat a link to Loreto's article as well as a link to Bruce Bekkar's article, so you can see them right away. Thank you. And just a reminder to everyone that this event is being simultaneously translated into Spanish and Portuguese. At the bottom right of your screen, you should find a little globe that says interpretation. If you click on that, you can hear it in one of those 2 languages. Moving on to our third panelist, who is Maya Mailer. She's coming to us from London, England. Maya, you were a human rights activist before you were a climate activist. What was it that drew you over to the climate side of things? And why are you a parent activist? Why do you come to this as a mother rather than wearing one of the many other hats I'm sure you have in your life?
Thanks, Pamela, and thanks everybody. It's so inspiring to be part of this panel and see all the people have joined from around the world. Yes, so my background is as a human rights campaigner, and I'm also a mum to 3 kids. That's where my expertise in early childhood comes in. They are aged 10, 8, and 3. Keep me very busy. I worked as an aid worker in South Sudan and spent a lot of time traveling to refugee camps across the Middle East, and that was absolutely my focus. And to be honest, the climate crisis seemed distant and abstract in comparison with the kind of the threats that I was seeing, the intense suffering that children and families were facing. And then I went on a journey, which I think is quite a familiar one. The youth strikes happened in the UK and globally. My own kids started coming home from school asking me questions, Mummy, is the world going to explode because it's so hot? And are all the animals going to get extinct? And then, I remember my 5-year-old asking the question the way kids do, why are we still driving a car when the Arctic is melting? And I just started to wake up, I suppose, and also think back to my own experience and remember the conversations I was having with women farmers in South Sudan, talking about how unpredictable weather was compounding their suffering. And it just clicked. And I saw climate as a question of justice. And then at the same time, I was on maternity leave with my youngest child. I met some mums in my local neighborhood who wanted to organize a mother's march. and asked me if I would join in. I was like, absolutely, let's do it. This was at the height of the youth strikes. And we really wanted to create a space for young children and for families with babies and younger kids to be able to come out on the streets and express their solidarity with the youth strikers and really raise their voice. So to cut a long story short, we organized this march in a matter of months with no budget, all by WhatsApp. On the day that the march happened, it was like, holding a party as a teenager. Who's going to turn up? Will it be 100? 3,000 people showed up. Most of them were first-time protesters with their babies on their backs and their young kids. And it was this really beautiful kind of formative moment for me and for many of us involved, some of whom are listening now. So that was back in 2019, May 2019. And from then I realized that there were so many parent groups. So we co-founded Mothers Rise Up. There was Parents for Future, UK, and then I got connected with these global networks, Our Kids Climate.
Maya, why do you think parent groups are especially effective or resonant now? They seem to be growing.
Exactly. Well, for me, initially, it just spoke to me at a very emotional, instinctive and practical level, because we could organize it in a way that worked with our life. But we began to realize that parents have huge power. There's a huge, the emotional voice, the moral voice of parents. We've done research with a group called Climate Outreach that demonstrates that the frame of protecting our children, protecting our nature, living in balance with nature and allowing our kids to access nature resonates across ideological boundaries. It resonates across political boundaries. So parents can be a very unifying voice, and that's not in a kind of reductive way. We also know that parenting is laden with judgment, but there is this ability for parents to bring more people into climate activism in a way that's not threatening. And so our groups work at many different levels. They work in the community, they work on public transport, on air pollution, and we're also doing campaigning work. And I think we can reach policymakers in a way that others can't. So we're running, for example, in the UK, a campaign targeting a big, powerful chairman of a insurance company that underwrites fossil fuels. And we're appealing to him, not as a corporate leader, but as a father. And we're saying, do what's right by your kids. We've sent him Father's Day gifts in the post, which he's received. We've protested outside his office with our babies, and we've got a meeting with the top team.
Great.
And I think
Maya, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off now. We have to move on to we're just giving a little juicy morsel of your very interesting first-person piece about your journey in the climate struggle, and we'll post your piece as well. We're moving on to our next speaker in the panel. She is Sana Suhal. As I mentioned, she is coming to us from the United Arab Emirates, from Abu Dhabi. In your article for ECM, Sana, you describe how Abu Dhabi has launched programs to teach children as young as 4 or 5 years old about climate change and to give them a chance to actually do something about it. You have an eco-spellathon, a sustainable schools initiative, and some other programs. Can you tell us a little bit about what these programs do, and also give us a sense of why Abu Dhabi wanted to start its programs with young children? Why does that age matter?
Thank you so much for the invitation, first of all, and I was truly honored to contribute in this important journal. Obviously, the purpose of this edition was really inspiring, where we are trying to bridge or create the bridges between two growing policy agendas, which are early childhood development and environment justice. So basically, the beauty was that in Abu Dhabi, we wrote this article together, two agencies, myself and Dr. Sheikha Al-Dhahri, who hasn't been able to join here, but she's the Secretary General for the Environment Agency. I mean, before I get to the question, I have to mention that today, on the 2nd of December, we are here in Abu Dhabi and UAE celebrating our Golden Jubilee. National Day, I just want to share this, happy moment with you, and I'm really glad to be with you on this special day. So this was through this article we tried. It is like a humble effort from both of us to capture all the efforts that are being made on these two important topics and bring them together. So anyways, of course, in Abu Dhabi and UAE, there are really like massive efforts done on a strategic level. As you know that UAE is just a 50 years old, ambitious young country that has really taken major steps on the climate change topic, and there are multiple projects on a strategic level on the national level, and of course aiming to reduce emissions and also improve air quality. And there are numbers, targets, which I can always come back to, but specifically on the tactical level or grassroots level, where the young children are heavily involved. I would like to maybe talk about two specific projects. And as you know, in the article, we covered more than one initiative, but here I will talk about two. One is, as Pamela mentioned, Enviro Spellathon, which, this initiative targets, children in the age between 4 to 11, and it's just the very early stages, and it promotes eco-literacy among children, where we have more than 90% of, Abu Dhabi schools that are registered in this initiative. And basically it brings children closer to their environment by including it in their curriculum, raising the awareness and appreciation to the environment as they learn, count, and spell. So more than 1.8 million children benefited from this program since its launch in 2001. So as you can see, it's been there for 20 years. The other initiative I would like to briefly talk about is a Sustainable Schools Initiative. And this specific initiative has been running from 2009. And it basically, while the first one was more about awareness and bringing children closer to the topic and issues, this one is, converting the awareness into actions. So basically it targets ages 12 to 17, where you already built the foundation for in the earlier program. And it's implemented in 150 schools across Abu Dhabi, and it has been very effective, where even United Nations cited it as an example for a global best practice. And basically this program builds capacity in the school community to reduce their environmental footprint, and basically increase the environmental handprint. So
great. Sana, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off now. Once again, I'm going to refer our listeners to your piece in ECM, which has a lot more detail about all of the work that Abu Dhabi is doing in this dimension. I'm moving us on now to Francine HOUBEN, who comes to us from the Netherlands. Francine, in this issue of ECM, we talk a lot about how children don't just need lower emissions from cars. They need experiences of nature to develop an appreciation of nature. As many of our authors made the point, you have to love nature before you can really want to save it. Now, in your design work, you bring a lot of sort of natural environments to streets, to cities you design. How do you do this, and what's your goal in the work that you do?
Yes, hello all. Very happy to hear all these voices, and often female voices. What I did write down two experiences, what I both did in the Netherlands and both in the city of Rotterdam. Like 30 years ago, I did design a kind of new garden city for 650 houses. And I said, I don't want to give every house just a row house. It's affordable housing. It was for a social housing company, a house with a garden. No, I also want to create collective gardens. And what I really wanted, because I think children develop their senses when they're very young. So I wanted to create a public space, not just with grass and trees and concrete tiles. No, I created 4 different gardens inspired by different landscape typologies. But also in my idea to give the children different experience. So I did a French garden, a Japanese garden, an English garden, and a Dutch garden, but also with feeling the different seasons, selecting different trees. That there's not just one type of tree, that there's many different trees, different smells. But even in my pavement, that if you're on your little bike, then you hear different sound when you go on another pavement. Or what I did is to make it, because this part of Holland is very flat, but I was born in the south where you have hills, so I also created little hills. So I wanted to give the children this experience. And it was very successful. But I went back like a year ago when I did write also the article for you. And I realized I went there with the boss of the housing company. And in a way, I was a little bit disappointed because it was not maintained anymore that well. But also I did realize, all these kids are gone. I did design it for young children at that time. But everybody loves the neighborhood so much, so they stay there. So they're now, the people who are living there are 50 plus, 60 plus, and all the kids are like 30 or 35 years old. So what to do with it? I don't have a solution yet, but maybe it could be interesting. I'm just now improvising by listening to you. Maybe we can set up, maybe with the Bernard Verleen Foundation, to make interviews what they did experience as when they were young kids, how it was to live in that neighborhood. Did it really influence them? No, that's another thing.
Francine, when you did this project many years ago, it was an innovative project.
Yes, very
now
innovative.
It looks like more and more people are getting on board and doing similar projects. Is that true?
I'm not sure, because I'm really a person about talking about senses and about children, how important it is to develop the senses. So I think it's still a very unique project, but maybe it could be interesting to also research better if it's really was influential on them or not. Okay, it's just an idea. Another thing, because now, and I also realized that I have to communicate maybe again with the people who are living there now and tell them what was the idea about it. But okay, that's an other story what we have to do. But I thought maybe it's interesting to do this research. Another thing what we're doing now, also with the help of the Bernard Verleen Foundation, is we made, as Bekkar, we made a new perspective of one of the worst areas, the most problematic areas in the Netherlands, and that's Rotterdam South, where about 200,000 people live. And we started to analyze and come up with new ideas. And one of these ideas was that we realize that there is around this big neighborhood in Rotterdam is a dike for the protection of the raising water, like the Netherlands was flooded like 70 years ago. Mm-hmm. But that dike was made in a very infrastructural way. It was just put there. And it became really a barrier between where people live, the neighborhoods, and the harbor where the jobs. Mm. So there's now a lot of unemployment in that neighborhood. And in a way, in the harbor, they need people to do the work, but they are disconnected.
Francine, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there in your description of this new project.
Okay. Then I just want to say that we are now working on to make this a very beautiful linear park with biodiversity, for health, for showing children, small children. We now focus on the small children, how they can learn about the changing of the seasons, make maybe kitchen gardens there, so that we make it really a crucial changing element in that neighborhood.
Wonderful. Okay, and once again, I will refer you to Francine's piece, which we'll post in chat in this year's edition of ECM, which describes her projects and going back to look at past projects and reflecting. I want to ask a quick follow-up question to Bruce Bekkar about research into the effects of climate change on young children and babies. What is the sort of next step in what is it that you researchers really need to know next in order to be able to make changes?
It's a great question because so much comes down to really kind of refining the risk levels and identifying vulnerable windows in pregnancy, what are the most critical times to avoid heat exposure and air pollution exposure, what are the effects of the combination of heat and air pollution on birth outcomes, because these things often do occur together. Heat does increase the level of ozone, for instance. So all these areas are important to research. There have been a number of studies that have come out since ours was published that are looking to answer these questions and assign specific risk levels to these exposures at various levels of the heat and air pollution. But I want to underline something Maya said, because in fact, I'm not a researcher. I'm actually a local activist at heart. And I think what she said was so important, that children and families and mothers are really the tip of the spear when it comes to motivating impacts on legislators in local districts. And so I'm really eager to help support the utility of this information. Where do we go from here? We send the women in our community as well as the doctors in our community to local city councils and lobby for building electrification and for addressing climate change in any one of a number of ways, because that's really what helps to bring about change so often, is action at the local level.
Maya, what's the next step for you? How do you see taking this to scale, what you're doing, and making it even more effective?
Thanks, Pamela. I mean, it is growing. So the parent movement, we have twin networks, Our Kids Climate, Parents for Future Global, that are bringing together over 60 groups from 20 different countries. And one area that we're really focused on is the intersection between children's health, toxic air, the climate crisis, and a call to end all new fossil fuels. We were able to deliver a letter to Alok Sharma at COP26. So we are continuing the work at all levels globally, but also, as Bruce said, in our local communities. And we've got many different ways that we're doing it. The movement is too diverse to give you the...
Okay. Sana, we just have 1 minute left for the panel. What about you? What do you see as the next steps for Abu Dhabi?
I mean, obviously, we will need to just continue, doing the work we started more than 20 years ago, and we just continue, especially working on the ecosystem through policies we implement through, obviously, us as authority and also, the environment authority. So yes, I mean, there is a lot. I mean, in 1 minute, I will not be able to capture everything, so I have to be realistic.
Okay. Well, thank you so much to all our panelists for being here. Again, this was just a juicy morsel from each person to get a sense of what's in their piece, and which I would urge you to read all their pieces in ECM. So thank you again. I'm going to turn the reins of this event back over to Cecilia Vaca-Jones. Ceci is going to introduce our closing speaker. And I'd be interested to hear what you think of what the speakers had to say, Ceci, and also, what else we can do to bring young children into the climate conversation where they belong.
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you all, because I think it's been amazing just listening these snapshots from each of your articles. And of course, we have other articles that are also super interesting. But I just want to say, Pamela, my first takeaway is children need to be in the center of climate discussions. And I think this is, for me, the most important thing at the moment. And I just want to probably highlight a couple of ideas. As Maya and Wanjira Mathai remind us, it is important that we as human beings reconnect with nature. And I think for me, this is a very important message. It's probably a good time to acknowledge that we are all part of Mother Nature and that we need to reconnect with nature. But I also want to bring into account the fact that we do have very good and reliable data. And I think Bruce and Loreto show us very concrete examples of how we can use data to inform policy. And I think this is the good news and optimistic news for all of us. And last but not least, I think that today we just heard some very practical solutions coming from Sana and Francine on how you can basically implement policy that can bring these benefits, that bring together these links of creating well-being for young children and their families, while also enforcing environmental justice. And I do want to highlight Francine's example of being practical, also how you can contribute from the design perspective, because I think this is one or remains one of the main challenges that we have in all these growing cities around the world, is are we really bringing the right solutions that can bring green and blue infrastructure back to our cities? And are this responding to the needs and the participation of people? There's so much to say, as you can all see, but I'll stop there because I want to introduce you to our last speaker who's going to be making final remarks. He's a dear friend and a champion, a mayor in a beautiful city that's called Jundiaí in Brazil. So Luz Fernando Machado, welcome to this panel. We're looking forward to hear your final remarks. And just to say that Luz Fernando has been doing amazing work in his city, Jundiaí, on actually bringing together these concepts on how he can ensure the well-being of young children in his city. So Luiz Fernando, open to you.
Muito obrigado, Cecília. Muito obrigado a todos que aqui nos acompanham. Um dia muito especial para todos nós. Um momento muito especial de nós podermos aquilo que temos feito em Jundiaí, com muita vontade política de poder transformar a vida da nossa comunidade, a vida das nossas crianças de uma forma geral. Primeiro, dizer da oportunidade que tive de ser pela e a gratidão pela Fundação Bekkar, através das suas pessoas, especialmente a Cláudia Vidigal, dado tantas oportunidades de transferência de conhecimento para nós. Eu tenho acreditado que, por muitas vezes, os políticos não são tão mal intencionados. Eles são muito mal informados e muito mal formados para essa dinâmica da sociedade, especialmente a dinâmica do encontro da criança com a sua cidade, da criança com a sua comunidade. Eu sou pai de 3 filhos e a minha fonte de inspiração está dentro de casa, com 3 crianças que eu quero vê-las com um horizonte melhor de uma sociedade, de uma comunidade, em todos os desafios que estão presentes na nossa vida moderna. Os desafios do futuro, os desafios da convergência com as mudanças climáticas, do respeito ao meio ambiente, do respeito à natureza. E o legado que o prefeito tem, objetivamente, de poder, através da sua ação, garantir uma infância mais segura, mais saudável e mais vibrante para todos aqueles que moram nas nossas cidades. E para isso, nós acompanhamos todos os passos de vida das nossas crianças aqui na cidade de Jundiaí. E com base nessa prioridade que foi estabelecida por nós, nós começamos desde 2017 a institucionalizar a política pública da criança na cidade. Eu digo institucionalizar porque nós temos uma diferença muito grande na política que é feita por um governo e ela tem um tempo para se finalizar, da política que é feita por um Estado que tem um caráter perene. As nossas políticas em Jundiaí, aqui no Brasil, não são políticas que se encerrarão ao meu mandato, ao término do meu mandato. As políticas públicas em Jundiaí permanecerão, porque a cidade encontrou um caminho não só de amar as suas crianças, mas de colocar no corpo da lei da sua cidade aquilo que é importante para o nosso município, aquilo que é importante para o desenvolvimento da nossa comunidade. Nós criamos um modelo aqui onde o plano diretor urbanístico na cidade, o uso e ocupação de solo no município de Jundiaí tem um capítulo especial tratando da criança. Eu vi aqui que urbanistas fizeram considerações, arquitetos, e aqui nós definimos um uso e ocupação de solo onde a criança é parte de um capítulo específico. Nós criamos modelos de parques naturalizados com a presença de um instituto chamado Alana e da Fundação Bernard Van Leer, onde nós utilizamos espaços públicos exatamente para que as crianças se associem à brincadeira e ao ar livre com a natureza. Nós dizemos aqui em Jundiaí que brincar é uma coisa muito séria e fazer com que as crianças possam brincar, especialmente em espaços naturalizados, em espaços onde a natureza está presente, é uma válvula extremamente importante para uma melhor formação cognitiva, motora e sensorial. E também nesta pandemia provou-se com a natureza emocional. As crianças que têm áreas verdes, as crianças que brincam próximos às suas casas, em parques naturalizados, as escolas destas crianças, quando tem horta escolar, quando você tem uma horta orgânica administrada pelas próprias crianças, elas têm dentro do conceito da sua formação uma melhor capacidade emocional. A pandemia nos trouxe um efeito muito claro de que o dano causado às crianças não é o dano necessariamente pedagógico pela ausência das aulas. O dano causado às crianças é um dano enorme da natureza emocional. E nós tivemos a felicidade de entregar um parque de 170 mil metros quadrados, o mundo das crianças, onde todo o conceito estabelecido está voltado para as brincadeiras ao ar livre, associadas à natureza. Nós aqui entendemos que, por muitas vezes, uma criança que sobe as árvores, uma criança que tem os seus limites encontrados a partir da relação com a natureza, é uma criança mais feliz e será uma criança mais potente, uma criança mais forte. Consolidamos tudo isso em um observatório de dados da primeira infância. São 80 indicadores que nós temos em Jundiaí que fomentam exatamente essa capacidade de nós termos métricas para o desenvolvimento das políticas públicas que podem alcançar melhores resultados para as nossas crianças. Um exemplo, eu tenho em Jundiaí hoje, que é uma cidade no interior do estado de São Paulo, aqui no Brasil, a menor taxa de mortalidade infantil da nossa história. E nós temos o melhor índice educacional em Jundiaí da nossa história, o que significa que as bases estabelecidas para o crescimento da nossa cidade são bases que respeitam a primeiríssima infância, respeitam a primeira infância e respeitam a criança de uma forma geral. Nós estamos muito felizes, porque muitos dos atributos que aqui foram postos pelos oradores que me antecederam são atributos que já são executados em Jundiaí, como, por exemplo, aferir a qualidade do ar da nossa cidade, do ambiente onde as nossas crianças estão. Nós entendemos que a preservação da água, a preservação das nossas florestas, a preservação da natureza é um atributo muito especial para a preservação da nossa própria espécie. Eu tenho me inspirado.
Thank you, Luis Fernando is an amazing mayor. As you can see, he is taking action. And I think this is the whole purpose, that today we can listen to the different speakers. I myself feel very inspired by each of you. So a big thank you for everybody who's part of the Bernard Valier Foundation, because it's thanks to your actions, to your thinking, to your data, to your knowledge that we're able to release this year's publication that we feel very proud.